Vladimir Putin is sounding as defiant as ever about Russia's war on Ukraine. He's delivered a speech this morning that was bellicose in tone and filled with grievance against the West.
Добрый день, прошу вас.
Putin's speech to the Russian Federal Assembly is billed as his State of the Union address. It's supposed to be given annually by the Russian president, but Putin pushed back the date from late December. This morning, his remarks are being closely read for what they tell us about Putin, the Kremlin, and Russia as we approach the first anniversary this week of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Briar Stewart is on the story for us. She was listening in live from London. Putin spoke for nearly 2 hours, Briar. What are the main highlights of his speech? What did he say?
Well, it's clear, Heather, that this speech was aimed at both an international and a domestic audience. And you mentioned it was nearly 2 hours long. He did the speech in front of a crowd of Russia's political elite. And in that crowd, there appeared to be some soldiers as well in their dress uniforms with medals. But this speech was carried all over state television. And in fact, there were large screens outside one mall in Moscow that was projecting the speech onto the street below. So it really was everywhere. And he certainly used the first part of the speech to repeat some of the accusations and claims that we've been hearing for months now. He talked about how it's the West that started the war. He also announced that Russia was going to be suspending its participation in a nuclear treaty that it had entered into previously with the United States. At one point in the speech, he took a turn and tried to play up what I guess he was trying to call Russia's moral superiority. He talked about how the West was on the brink of some kind of spiritual catastrophe. So he kind of packed a lot of content into this speech, but I'd say the latter half of it was really focused on the domestic audience because he talked about how Russia and how he wants to set up a fund to support the families of fallen soldiers and just other initiatives to make life more affordable for average Russians. And I guess you could really see that as kind of a deliberate attempt to try to boost his popularity as this war enters its second year.
Very soon, in fact. Friday marks the first anniversary of Russia's launching the invasion of Ukraine. And as we have talked about over the year, it's been widely reported Putin expected the war to be over in mere days. Obviously, that's not the case. So in what position does Russia find itself in now?
Well, President Putin is desperate for some kind of military win, and in absence of that, he's really trying to continue to sell this special military operation, because, of course, that's what they still refer to it as in Russia. And so he used part of the speech to talk about how it was a good thing that Western companies have left Russia because that means that the Russian economy can go through a much-needed transformation. He talked about how the sanctions aren't really all that punishing, even though another round of sanctions is expected to be levied this week. And even though, recent polls still suggest that Putin is very popular, a poll in December suggested he has an 80% approval rating, the longer the war goes on, the more soldiers that are killed, the longer there are restrictions in place around banking and around travel, the more of a chance there is that there will be widespread dissent, which is why he really tries to use these national speeches to frame this as just a fight for really Russia's entire existence.
Briar, thank you very much. Briar Stewart from our bureau in London. Now, I want to bring you some reaction to this speech from Brussels. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg speaking alongside the foreign minister from Ukraine and the EU foreign policy chief as well, saying that Putin made it clear today he is preparing for more war. And that's an echo of the statement he gave us last week as the defense ministers met, that NATO sees no indication Russia is preparing for peace. Stoltenberg says no one is attacking Russia. Russia is the aggressor. And he also indicated growing concern China is planning to support Russia's war. He said this makes it all very urgent to deliver on all pledges of weapons supplies for Ukraine and is going to be working to procure those as quickly as possible. He also commented on something that we heard from Putin, that it is suspending its participation in the New START program, which was Russia's last major nuclear arms control treaty with the United States. Putin announcing stepping back from that. Stoltenberg saying regrets that decision and urges Russia to reconsider it. So that is the reaction from NATO. We're going to hear from U.S. President Joe Biden as well this morning, looking live at pictures of the presidential palace in Poland. This is in Warsaw. And ahead of Joe Biden's arrival to meet with the president of Poland in just a matter of minutes. We're just keeping an eye here for the motorcade. It has not yet arrived. But he's moved on to Poland after his surprise visit to Kyiv yesterday. Biden's remarks today will follow up that history-making trip to Ukraine to meet personally with President Volodymyr Zelensky. We'll carry that speech live for you at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. He is set to meet the president privately, and then we'll make those public remarks. There's another angle to the shot as Poland and its president, Duda, get set to meet U.S. President Joe Biden. We'll be taking you live to Ukraine for special coverage as well from our CBC News team. Margaret Evans is, in fact, in Zaporizhia this morning, not far from the front lines. Margaret, that speech from Vladimir Putin that we're talking about, what is the reaction that you're hearing, the early reaction there in Ukraine?
You know, Heather, I don't really think that there's very much that President Putin could have said that would have surprised the Ukrainian people. They've heard speeches like this before. Some commentators did mention the fact that he did not announce any major battle victories in this speech. But when he introduced those false narratives we've heard before about the West, about the Ukrainian leadership being the ones to start the war, there's just a lot of eye rolling here, and people will point you to the mass graves of Bucha or Izum. So there's not much he could have said to surprise people. There have been a lot of reaction, as you might imagine, on social media. I was going to tell you what the mayor of Dnipro, is a city just down the road from where I am, had to write about it. He said he was actually surprised to see how many people are trying to analyze the feverish delirium of a madman designed for his roommate. So that gives you just a sense of how people are feeling about it here. I think there's also quite a bit of glee, if you like, about the visit, the surprise visit of the U.S. President Biden here yesterday. Stealing a bit of President Putin's thunder is how most people here would see it. It was a huge boost for the morale of people. They've been having a little bit of fun with it on the internet as well. You'll see, for instance, pictures of President Biden superimposed, on the train to Poland with the displaced talking to them. Or there's a gas station here where soldiers are given free hot dogs, and they've got, they made a picture of Biden eating one of those hot dogs. So it's given a sense of ahead of this anniversary where there are real jitters, a bit of a sense of positiveness, but people are still very concerned. They've been worried all along that there might be some kind of marking by the Russians of this week. While President Putin was speaking, the city of Kherson came under shelling. And of course, we've seen since last October these kind of mass airstrikes aimed at numerous cities and aimed at degrading infrastructure. So there are a lot of nerves about that, a lot of nerves about the future of the war. During our time here, we've met people who say, it's been a year, and for some people it's only just now sinking in that this is their reality, and they feel real confusion about how long this war might last. And even yesterday, with President Biden's visit, you saw some people saying, well, we're glad he came because we're starting to wonder that the West might waver, that the United States in particular might waver, because they have not responded favorably to requests for F-16 fighter jets. And some commentators have noted that while President Zelensky traveled to the United Kingdom, to Brussels, to Paris just over a week ago, and deliberately said, please give us these fighter planes, give us these wings to protect our freedom, there wasn't a lot of talk about those fighter jets publicly during President Biden's visit here yesterday.